Yeah, I think he is, but I think he's at a choke point. Oh, it's on? Oh.
That's that first meeting I had joining this, and that was, I brought that copy of the Salt Spring story, right? And
Yeah.
how they moved it to Richmond.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I thought we might be looking at trying to somehow assist guys like that to encourage them to stay on the island.
Yeah.
And a type of business that you want to have.
Totally.
And,
Well,
Okay, morning everyone, thanks for showing up.
yeah.
It's always 90% of success is showing up.
I thought it was 80, but like your number now.
Official number is 91.
We're optimists.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Or is it changed to the agenda?
Yeah, we have to
in the
change it.
sense that we, on number 4, we'll have, instead of public comments, that'll be into public comments, we'll have Daniel talking about Rondi's proposal. And there's also there'll be some discussion later on about we'll maybe combine this tourism Bowen Island thing with the EDC work plan, because there's a proposal to try to hire full-time community development officer in conjunction with tourism Bowen Island. So we can talk about that tonight. Okay?
That's already in the agenda, though, right?
Yeah, I suppose it is. It's been
Just the one that changed?
Yeah. Somebody like to propose approving the agenda?
sure.
Everyone? Yeah. Adoption of the minutes?
Yeah, there's one action item in the minutes that I'll report on a bit later.
It will be in the action items.
Yeah, it's not, and it was about the logging and stuff, so I don't think it was there.
It's in the minutes, but not in the list.
Not in the action
Yeah.
items, I just wanted to put it
All of those sections.
to make you aware that I've read the minutes.
Right.
More
It's
than
showing
anything.
up.
Yeah,
I move adoption of minutes.
Okay. Do we need to talk about the action items? Or-
we will at the action items.
All right, yeah. All right, that's a good place. Right.
It's a perfect place. On the
Uh,
agenda, we just-
so we just adoption of the minutes?
So no changes to the minutes?
No.
No.
Someone like to propose that? A second?
She was going to check.
That's later. Right. Okay.
Oh,
Welcome and introduction to Cheryl.
so I guess Lindsay, our esteemed representative from the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Skills.
You've been changed, moved.
So she's gone on to, was the.
Agriculture.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she had that nice goodbye, and then she sent a very nice letter of introduction to Cheryl, who sounded like it was more of a temporary replacement, maybe someone who wasn't feeling like taking Lizzie's job, but would be filling it until someone did. I've not been able to get a hold of Cheryl. I've emailed her a couple
She
times.
emailed back today.
Oh,
She responded today to your email.
okay,
She's not coming today, obviously.
right, yeah. So she's based in Nanaimo. I don't expect we'll see a lot of her.
Okay.
I had been hopeful, I guess, when I figured out agenda item, but
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And I think there was some talk, I think, about they're possibly reorganizing the economic development supports that they're doing as well. So we'll see how the new government deals with all of that. But yeah, we might not have that. I don't know, we might have a different kind of link, so. that
It
job
would be
may be-
good to just kind of keep in touch with them, I think. Steph,
Yeah,
and
okay.
Keep on, because Lindsay's a bit of a loss, she was.
Yeah.
great
Well, can-
with this one.
Can we clarify Lindsay's position? Because if there are agricultural interests on Bowen that
Is
relate to
there a
economic
certain
development,
region that
is that
she's doing
something
that
that she's
too?
doing?
It's
or-
Fraser Valley. I don't think we get to vote.
No, not at all?
No.
Okay.
And to be honest, it's like the connection with whatever jobs, training, and skills is really the
Right.
connection we need.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think the new government.
Well, I just think, I don't know what Lindsay's portfolio is, like if she covers this area but in a different way or not, and whether that still is a connection.
But yeah, maybe through her, we could find out who the agriculture person is for Bowen, and
Right.
then if that is something that might be a better
Okay.
fit.
Yeah.
I can talk to her and ask about that then.
So Steph, if you could
Yeah.
just do that, and you could keep in touch with Cheryl and try and, maybe they're doing some
Initiative.
reorganization, so, but would like to keep that
Absolutely.
support going, because it's an important aspect of the work.
Get us some support from the ministry.
Let's just let's just do action items arising from the minutes next. From last time.
Or did we want to do January?
Yeah.
Well, I think let's just, because the action items, because we just did it and they approved the minutes.
Sure.
So we might as well just
Okay.
do that next
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Robin, you're up.
I would say for 1 and 2, they're in progress. So I've been in touch with Jen, I think I reported this last time, and she's happy to do some kind of presentation at our summit, business summit in January. And I have sent Jen an email, but have not heard back yet, so I'll just keep following up with her.
Okay.
Is that Jen from the Bow and Everything Else?
No,
That's
Jenny
a different-
McGowan, I think it's a different Jen.
Jen
Yes.
Mac, yeah.
And she's the emergency safety program coordinator, I think that's the title, yeah,
Emergency program.
emergency program coordinator.
Most of the other stuff I think is going to come up in the agenda itself, so there's nothing much to really report on.
I have just the logging stuff, which is the one thing that's not on here.
It is, I think it's on number 15. It just says they're not very
work
well
on letter
phrased, so they're
phrase.
just pulled out of context.
Number 15 is that, I think that's a branding use, branding stuff. Well, and we're putting the wall.
Or number 16, then it's.
It was-
Oh, 16, right, okay.
15, yeah.
The, David Hawking was writing a response from the municipality, and I gave him a ton of info to do that, so I feel like what he's doing is supporting a bunch of statements that Murray made, or Marishfields made when they were opposing the timber sales. And so he's now running around making the background paper and providing a lot of data, so I did a bunch of digging around for him, got him some good numbers and stuff, so I feel like that's good.
Work, okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's where it's gone, so if there's anything else that they required from us, they could ask us, but I was working with David on that.
Great, thank you.
David's writing a letter from the municipality.
He's backing up Murray's statements, yeah, with data, so he's doing research, yeah.
Anything from you, Steph, on that, from there?
Oh, well then, book docs. You guys had your strategic, did a bit of work getting that organized. The lodge has been confirmed, January 23rd, for the business summit. I just kind of keep confirming with them. Because I just keep calling them and say, we're still good. And they say, yeah, like it, we're still good. So,
January 23rd.
yeah, Tuesday, January 23rd. Added Shannon to the licensing committee. I guess, those subcommittees, your webpage is so full, but maybe kind of list the subcommittees on the webpage. Do you think that'd be useful? No, okay. But they exist. I sent you guys the list, and
Right.
I have them in my server, so.
Listing the committee members on the page?
Well, no, maybe, I
Or like-
don't know. I just thought of some way that you guys could access that information
Yeah,
more
yeah.
easily than having to wait for me to show up in the morning. Anyways, think about it, I guess. Yeah, the COW meeting is on the webpage. iCompass capability for online payments. iCompass cannot do online payments. I checked with them, that's not possible. I'm going down the list. That's it for me. Those are all mine.
Cool. All right, so let's move on to the.
Well, I'm wondering, do you know anything about business licensing information from the survey?
So I read it because I took a lot of this agenda from last month's agenda. And then I saw the business licensing. I thought there had been a report that Maureen was looking at.
Mhm.
She mentioned the other day there had been about 30 respondents.
Yeah,
I kind of thought I'd get a report from her,
Okay.
but I expect that she's
right.
out of her mind busy
Right,
right now.
okay.
And so I didn't chase her down for it. I think she's getting some good answers.
Okay,
And then,
yeah.
by the way, that list was very...
They were
very-
responsive.
Yeah, and we can work on the list and now
Yeah.
for other ways that might be useful.
Yeah, okay, we can talk about that more, I just didn't know, because that was not an action item too.
I know.
Agreed.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, Daniel. Welcome. You got a particular?
I just have some visuals to join the presentation, but thanks for having me here. last minute. Those who I think I've met
Do we want to
I'm
pass
Rod.
these out?
Rod.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
You have them?
So I'm Daniel Martin. I'm the Island Community Planner here, and I have a rezoning application that was made that was presented to council on October on Tuesday night. And so we're coming here as quick as we possibly can. And so I noticed a story about this application in the paper for those who want a little more background. But essentially what we're looking at is an application at the Union Steamship Marina. So as we all know, it's located in Sun Cove Harbor. In terms of our zoning, it's in the zone that's the Water Commercial 1A zone. So it's sort of specific for this area. It allows a number of uses. It's quite a complex zone, but it allows marina and public wharf. It allows for as accessory uses what we call a float house, and that's limited to 2% of the total berths on the in the marina, and that's subject to connection to sewer pump out facilities.
Yeah, can I just ask a question? Is a float house different from a boat that is, a houseboat that's sitting there moored
Like a
permanently?
liveaboard.
Yeah, so we allow
Yeah.
liveaboards, and I think they're limited to 15 liveaboards, and a float house. So a float house is like a floating building that has a dwelling in it that can't be, it's not navigable.
Thank you.
So if you're living in your boat, but it's a boat that could go out and leave, that would be a liveaboard. Whereas a float house is like, you see the one that's close to a ferry that is new, that's like, you can't take it out on the sea.
Right, it's more like a
Yeah,
Yeah,
house.
so the
with a boat.
the existing float houses are that one, and also the clubhouse thing with it.
So no, so the office is actually they have a separate thing for that. The existing float house is that new one, and they have two older cabins that are sort of against the, they're on the land side of it,
Yeah.
you'll see them, they're older
Yeah.
ones, yeah.
Thank you.
And so in the zone, each float house limited to 85 square meters in total, so that's sort of, I think, 900 square feet. Yeah, and so yeah, as we said, a float house, how we define a float house is a building that containing a dwelling unit designed to float on water, but it's not intended or suitable for navigation. And then we said there's currently 150 marina berths, so they're allowed up to 3 float houses, like we said, so they've maxed out their float houses in the zoning. And so the application we received is to permit up to 6 floating buildings. And so I'm terming it differently than a float house, because these buildings would have 1 or 2 dwelling units in each building. So we say a float house can have 1 dwelling unit. They're looking at, maybe these are like duplex buildings with 2 units in them. They would each be about that 55 square meters, which is sort of, what's my math, 700 square feet maybe?
So 2 times 700 times 6? Is the idea?
No, so the total building would be that
Okay.
55 square meters, and they'd either be divided into 2 small units, or they would combine them and make them
So they're just basically like hotel rooms.
Yeah, essentially. Like I have here, I can circulate. It's not in the report, but that's a sample floor plan. The other drawings are there, but it doesn't include the floor plan. Got a copy there, here. Somewhere around. Just in terms of what they look like. So site context, where they were proposed is right along this sort of this dinghy berth area, which is currently, fairly underused. It's sort of, it's quite shallow in there, so you can't necessarily get a boat in and out. And Ronnie's provided some drawings of what that would look like. So this is showing 6 of them lined up along that. So immediately when you come down the ramp and on your left, and you go along there, you'll be on your left-hand side. So this is sort of an image of one of them, what it looks like in context. So this is the top of the bank. We've shown this is a 0 tide. This is slow, this is a high tide. So at a high tide, there'd be, almost level with the top of the bank, and their extent is, they're however much taller they are, about that, 5 meters up from that. And then at a low tide, they'd be actually below the top of the bank at all. They'd be completely sort of hidden down there. Give us a little elevation of what they would look like. I'll note too, so this is the rezoning. It would also need a development permit, which is when you actually regulate form and character of buildings. So that would be a further step this application would need to actually govern. That's when they regulate and say it has to look like this, it needs this type of finishing or whatever is deemed important for that. So in terms of to allow this to go forward, amendment to the land use bylaw to create a definition for the sort of floating building with multiple dwelling units and to put a maximum number of these buildings in this zone. When we brought this to council, we talked about we would also probably be recommending a housing agreement on it, and that's something the municipality can require as part of a rezoning, and that can govern tenure of building, can govern maximum rates of buildings that can govern eligible tenants for the building. So Rondi's proposal is that this would be to house staff workers for the Union Steamship. There's many other businesses, they're finding it hard to find workers and find housing for workers that they have. So, I think they've limited docks opening hours and stuff because they can't find people to do it. So they think that this is a way to actually be able to house workers. But
Would it just be the marina worker, just workers for Rondi, or kind of?
I mean, that's what they're proposing. So what I've said here and what I said to council is we'll probably would want a housing agreement on it, but would limit it to workers. But I don't think, like, from the municipality's point of view, we're as concerned that it be just workers for the marina. If it's like, if they don't have, but a worker from the pub wants to stay there, and we're okay with that too. What I did say is we probably want to then exclude it from commercial guest accommodation, so it's not a B&B. These ones we would allow them to be, there, but we said that's great if you want to house workers there, that's what you're allowed to do.
Who would monitor that?
We can, so in the housing agreements we have, we can require them to provide tenancy agreements.
But is there an authority that's set up to monitor those type of things, or was the municipality at this point?
No, it's the municipality, it would be me essentially,
Right.
for bylaw,
Because I
yeah.
know that are there a number of different housing agreements that the municipality is kind of exploring right now?
We currently have, we have in Belterra, we have 3 units there restricted to the affordable ownership.
Yeah.
We have one with the Ruddy Kitchen site at Sunset and Adams, I think it is. We have ones with the pub and with the distillery that are under construction.
So can you tell me a little bit about that? I'm curious about those tenancy agreements, how they connect a person and a job and a house together in a way how have you done those?
So what we've put on the pub and distilleries, we have sort of eligible tenant criteria. And I think it's like for those ones, it wasn't just workers, but it says you're either employed on Bowen, you've lived on Bowen for a set period of time before then. And I think those ones had somehow broke it down. If you're a senior on Bowen, it was maybe a less time period than if you weren't. And so typically then what we would ask for, I guess, then from people is we'd say, well, what about the tenancy agreement to show that, okay, you've got a long-term tenant in there, and that would show how much you're charging as well, because we would stick rates on them. And we'd probably just look then for something from the tenant to say this is how I'm eligible.
So is the intention that this is low-cost housing, basically?
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting, because in the article, I don't know if it's in your
Yeah.
report, that there was a quote that Ronnie thought they're about 225 square feet,
Yeah.
right, that he would charge $800 a month, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't see that being as affordable housing. But would you again have some input on setting those rates? That you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, what we've put in other ones is we restrict it to sort of below
Below
market, but market defined as the greater Vancouver market.
Right.
So probably, we're saying it's a 1 bedroom, it's probably the maximum we would put would be 1,000 a month or something.
That seems a lot
Yeah.
for 1 bedroom.
Well, 250 square feet.
Two-
Yeah, for a
250 square feet.
studio,
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably
Like
less.
Is there
That's
any way,
terrific.
is there any way to link the rent to wages? So to say to the employer, take whatever your wage, your minimum wage or whatever that is, and then you do the formula to what's the affordability. So
Yeah.
I run it on minimum wage, which is $11 an hour now, 10, 11. And if you work full time, you can afford $590 a month, per,
Yeah.
30% of your gross
That's a
income going
co-op,
to.
similar to co-ops.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a few different measures
Yeah.
that say that 30% mark. Is that something that's within the realm of possibility of restricting rents to link it to wages?
Probably, yeah, I would think probably.
Because I think that's a much,
Yeah.
I mean, in my mind, that's a much better determinant than something 10% below Metro Vancouver
Yeah.
rates. Because if you're paying your workers $11 an hour, you have to give them a place to live that they can afford that.
Yeah.
And you could just the metric, you could say fine, it's 35% or 40% because given, whatever. But
Yeah.
I would prefer to see some kind of metric like that. So sure, if you want to pay your people $15 an hour, then up the rent. But you
Yeah.
have to, I would prefer to see it linked to
Okay.
the lowest
Yeah.
wages.
So I know there was a lot of work done in the, by Tim Wake, for setting up a
Yeah.
housing authority through the municipality.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that work is being reviewed or drawn in when these kind of decisions are being made. Is that a
Yeah,
correct assumption? I don't know.
So they did a lot of work, preparing draft agreements and stuff, and we've been using that model. So that's where the Volterra
Right.
from our policy.
And that's Whistler, they have laid
Yeah.
a lot of this
What?
policy.
Yeah. what I think hasn't is like at the time they got as far as, to set up a housing corporation, we advertised for directors. And nobody applied, and it kind of at that point fell apart, and so we don't, so, some of our policies still talk about like, the housing corporation will be having a wait list for people, and, we'll pick people off the wait list. We don't have any of that. We don't have a wait list, we don't have.
Fair enough.
But the
Yeah.
policy work that
But
they
the
did was
policy-
really good, and I think, I'm really agreeing with Robin, I think, in terms of our own mandate to provide advice around
Yeah.
all point number, let's see.
The policy, the
Uh,
referral.
Yeah, point number 2 especially, and, I think the idea that the housing agreement ties those to wages too, because the cost of living on Bowen is higher than in Vancouver, and if you're tied to Bowen because you have a job here, you may be paid minimum wage and you're being charged $800 a month on something, but your other costs are so much higher as well too. So I agree with Robin's advice on that.
Like the connection I don't get is because someone has a job temporarily and they get placed in a unit, the turnover in that marina I think is relatively high. So what happens in 6 months that person leaves the job? Do they have to exit and they take another job up the tub? Do they have to exit this unit?
Right.
And again,
Well, for me, my assumption is that the turnover is high because people can't find anywhere to live. So part of it is like, if we get, that might be part of it.
Well,
But
but
I don't think it should be restricted to jobs.
Right.
Because, so say you have a job,
Right.
but it's not going very well, but if
Exactly.
you walk away from that job, you're losing your housing, right? So you can't have it that tough.
That's
I-
how I was
it's
gonna
just not-
finish the
yeah,
the
it's
thought.
again, it's not fair to the employees either.
Right, so thanks. So to finish, the thought is that like part of it is producing the housing that provides some stability for people to work there, and I want to underscore, and I like what you're doing in terms of expanding it to people, the conditions that you're living, working on Bowen, that doesn't increase the vulnerability for workers having their employment tied to a housing unit, and that's kind of what was behind the original question I asked. So I think there's a balance there, and it has to do with, it includes the cost as well, but I think it needs to expand. Yeah, I would agree with that piece as well, that it's not just about the single employer. Now, it's gonna be tricky, but from a municipality perspective, it's like, we're also, it's a negotiation in a way between people that are building, capitalizing private housing stock, but actually for a community need. And I think balancing those two things is gonna be really important.
well, it sort of related to it, but different. I have a couple of friends who have business on the North Shore who cannot hire people at $20 an hour. So if all of a sudden you have 10 or 20 or 30 units, I don't know, I don't put that connection that you're going to find people all of a sudden to work those $15-hour dollar an hour jobs necessarily, but.
That's not our risk though, is it?
Yeah.
No, but we're approving this to provide spaces for people with jobs on the island, I think you have to put a connection, and that's how it's going to work.
Yeah.
I suspect there will not be a problem if they are priced reasonably. There will not be a problem to fill them, especially if it is open to everybody. Just because, even just through anecdotal personal connections, there are people either living in a combination that really isn't suitable, either they're roommates or they're whatever, or they're living in a combination that they're paying way too much for. So if something opened up that was a reasonable price, they would jump on it and leave their current accommodation.
And what's reasonable?
Well, yeah, that's why I would see, and I don't know how we phrase it, but that would be my recommendation, to tie it to wages, whether it's a set rate of wages or that individual person's wages sets whatever the mechanism is. That would be mine. And yeah, to what we were saying before, I don't know if we can control it, but yeah, if there's some way to say it's open to all Bowen workers, and you can't be kicked out if you lose your job at Rondi's. Do you know what I mean? So whether that's stipulated, they have to sign a lease, because then obviously once you've signed a proper lease, then it's the legislation takes over, and they can't simply kick you out because of change of employment.
Right.
So
Robin,
I don't know if there's a way.
Can I ask you to clarify that a little bit?
Yeah.
How would it work if you tied it to somebody's individual pay? That could get very complicated because their pay might change.
Or if they're not working
You're
for
looking-
Union Steamship.
You're looking at,
Right,
or they're not
yeah.
working at a Union Steamship, or
Yeah.
you're looking at you having to monitor that somehow? It
How
could
tied
get
into
very
minimum
unwieldy,
wage.
right? And you know, does the community want to be involved to that extent?
Well, it's a very good question, and I mean, like, that's what's going on in my mind right now, just react, because if you tie it to minimum wage, in some ways I feel like that's unfair to them as a landlord, because they might be paying their cook $25 an hour, I don't know what cooks make, right? And so to have them paid based on $11 an hour really isn't fair, because they might be willing to pay $800 or $900 a month, I don't know, and there's large unions too. But I take your point that, yeah, how do you monitor that if they start at, maybe they get a job at $11 an hour and they sign a lease for that, and then 2 months later they find a better job for $20 an hour and
Yeah.
they're still in that. Whether it's just simply, I don't know, maybe it's just at the time you sign the lease, it's based on your income you're making and it's a 6-month lease, and that's kind of the landlord's risk, is that they're saying we're gonna give, that's what any landlord does, right? They sign a 6 or 12-month lease and they say it's this rent, and if rents
Would
go
it
up.
be better just to tie it to the fact that you have to be working on bond?
Mm.
Because then it would be up to the worker and Rondi to say what was an acceptable rent, right? And if they have to be working on bond
Yeah,
and it's full at $800 a month, then that's kind of the going rate, right? If he can't fill it at $800 a month, he's going to have to lower his rents.
right.
Well, I think one example that I can think of would be there's a dozen construction workers that are making $25 an hour that would be happy to rent them for $800 a month. So if he just put them on the market, he could fill them at $800 a month without housing any of his employees. But that's his own business decision, because then he will still have to
Right.
find
Still
employees
control.
that has housing.
Yeah.
So, his own interest has to regulate that. I think that's the nature of his proposal, is, he'll do what's in the best interest of his business. And having employees is in the best interest of his business.
And I guess it's that's brought up like a very high level question, and I guess our work as a committee and as representing a municipality, can we dictate that? Is this simply, it's a proposal, they're landlords, this is a free market, are we going to allow them to build it? The municipality allows them to prove it, and they can basically do what they want with it. They're telling us it's for workers, but you're right, they could, who knows, in 5 years, they could rent it to whoever they want for whatever price they want. That's one way to do it, total free market, whatever it is. Or because they're asking for this rezoning and all of this stuff, and they're giving them, do we say, and maybe it's even we say half of them have this housing agreement, maybe it's not all of them, like whatever it is that do we actually, as a community, want to impose, because we're giving them this thing, impose to say, yes, you can have that, but here's the trade-off, here's the housing agreement, that we as a community say, we want you to be able to house workers at a wage, at something they can afford based on their wages.
Well, they're asking us to change our LCP, so there needs to be some
Yeah,
exchange there.
yeah.
And, I think, for sure, they have this proposal, and there's reason, rationale behind that, and that's they want to house their own workers, and fair enough, absolutely. So I think, tying it maybe to a percentage, but again, with the requirements of having to be employed on low end. I know that in the past, there's a bunch of people who were retired, but
Yeah.
haven't lived on bonus and things, so possibly a percentage then, and not, at least some for market, but a percentage of them. Right now, isn't it 10% requirement for any new development?
That's 15%.
15%, okay, well then, whatever is the requirement for new development, with that aside, is the starting place?
Can I suggest that I think just the sense of the group here is that in principle it's a great idea to have small affordable housing units or low cost housing units. But we want to see a little bit. I think the agreement about what it can cover and how it covers it we need to see that again before we really wholeheartedly. And I think council, that would be a key element of it.
And that's, so in terms of this application, so we introduced it to council on Tuesday and referred it to the EDC and the APC, so the Advisory Planning Commission, before drafting a bylaw, drafting those agreements, and then we would then be coming back to council to do then our second, essentially that would be then referring it again to the APC and the EDC with actual bylaws and actual, more of that fleshed out. But so this is great because this is exactly what we want, is that initial feedback to say, yes, in general, it's a good idea, but we want more details on, on the things, and then we would come back with it.
So would it be right to say we agree with it in principle, but we're concerned about that it actually does benefit workers on boat, and that's.
And especially the low
Especially the
end
lower
wages, I'd say.
Wage.
Do you want to tie it into low-cost housing or affordable housing? Is that the
There's an
goal?
Affordability to be low-cost
Yeah,
housing.
yeah, there's an affordability issue, that's what we're saying. I mean, we don't have to approve this, but our
Yeah.
advice to you is this, like, we
Yeah.
actually want that built in.
Built in.
And the flexibility to not just be working at the marina is, I think, is a good thing, and then tying that to affordability. Yeah, low cost, low income. Because minimum wage is low income, let's be clear.
When it gets to, I don't know what the procedure is exactly, but you said this is a zoning bylaw amendment of the OCP, and then if that was approved, there would then be design considerations, and what's that process called?
So that's a development permit.
The development.
And that's anything in Smith Cove needs a development permit, and that goes to our advisory design panel.
Mhm.
There'll be some guidelines in general.
So that doesn't get referred to the EDC at that point?
No, no, yeah.
Yeah, no, not that it would, I'm just.
And Ronnie's on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rondi has a good track record of making, reasonable looking things,
Yeah,
but,
and
um,
he knows the requirements. so.
Yeah.
Just one point about affordability that doesn't apply to zoning necessarily, but it's interesting that I think probably some of the most affordable housing on Bowen is like housing at the general store, which is not is an old and barely maintained, but I don't have an issue with the way it's maintained. But the reason why it's the most affordable is because it's not a fancy dancy new building.
Yeah.
And if these are going to be fancy pants buildings, then they're not going to be affordable, is what I'm thinking.
Right.
So,
Do you know what the expectations are for rents? Any idea they're putting forward?
I mean, it's read the paper. We've talked sort of broadly about, your housing staff workers, and we're going to want some restriction on that you're not going to, right, gouge people. Like, you're going to say, okay, if you're housing the staff workers, then that's great, and we'll find some way to hold you to that.
Yeah, I think we can't. I think that we have to strike the balance, right, between trying to do what we can to get affordable, low-cost housing, and tying the landlord's hands. Because if we tie it too tight, he won't build it. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly, I
Yeah.
just had that
So,
thought, yeah.
so we have to. We don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth too close.
Yeah.
well, I could understand why Rondi would want to do float houses in his own, little business area.
Yeah.
But if it was much less expensive for him to buy a mid-island piece of land and apply for zoning for the same density on that piece of land and create, better opportunity for affordable housing, then why would he do it here? So I just wonder what that
Because
conversation
Because
is.
he doesn't have to buy a piece of
He has
land.
a-
Private land, which I
Yeah, he
I
has
can
the-
totally understand.
he has the land,
He's
yeah.
got
Yeah.
the water
Yeah,
leases. and-
it's a
makes
great
sense.
investment for him too.
Yeah,
yeah,
so
So,
too.
fair enough,
Yeah.
right?
Well, at a certain rental rate.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
it depends upon what the covenant is, because if we don't put that on, it could become, accommodations for vacations.
Right.
Yeah.
And make huge amounts of money on it. So-
Yes.
So I'm just saying the potential is there to use
Yeah.
private
Yeah.
uses.
Yeah.
And
not
maybe
for
that's,
commercial purposes.
yeah, and like, I, in some ways I agree with the short-term rental thing, but then it would be nice to talk to Rondi, is some of this like summer employees as well. So we, in that same vein of not wanting to restrict them
Right,
as a
yeah.
commercial enterprise, is half of them restricted to long-term, all that stuff, and maybe half of them, sure, you can do summers and then rentals and
Yeah.
like, because again, you want to make it financially viable for him to be able to build them,
Yeah.
and strike that balance between also providing worker housing, so,
It'd almost be good if you
question,
had
I don't know the answer.
like I'll use the term co-op, I know very little about co-ops, but a co-op type board that actually administered it. And so there were rules regarding, how much you make and how much is charged, but
Yeah.
you probably can't do it where it's on private property or someone
We
else's
can do it with
property.
the agreements, and I think that's what we're doing. So it's not going to be a co-op, but we can enforce, he's asking for a variance, so we can enforce a condition on it. That's what we're doing. I mean, I do think it's very important that this doesn't become commercial vacation housing. Because I would hate the precedent of people building staff housing and then converting it in 5 years or something into something else. it would completely defeat the purpose. You know, the units are so precious. So I'll take him at his word that he's building staff housing for staff and people that are working, and build that, bake that into the tenancy agreements and the use of the zoning for that.
I think that's the main thing.
It's very important, I think, and that sends actually a really good message to folks. I think it's actually what Ronnie's doing, what Glenn is doing, and Miguel, I think is really creative, and I'm appreciative of it because it's the only small, affordable kind of housing stock that's being built right now, like the quality housing stock that's being built right now for workers. So I think it's important to support that. It's a halfway step to what we really need, but it's an important one. And if the precedent is set that can all be converted to commercial at some point,
Yeah, we don't want that.
yeah, that would be a massive step backwards. So.
Well, and it certainly we wouldn't be fulfilling our policy in
Yeah.
terms of what we need to be providing.
Yeah.
We're talking about a housing crisis right now.
And local builders, that's the other thing we would say. I mean, I think we always say it anyway, but hopefully it's hiring local folks to do it. So, I mean, that's
There
another
goes the
piece of our policy too.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually don't know,
Oh,
except for
that's
maybe
firsthand.
Mike Shannon, I don't know that there's anybody on the phone that could build.
And
You never know.
and I wouldn't put that stipulation in.
no, it's just
That has to
advice.
be a
It's
market
just
thing.
advice. I
Yeah.
mean, it's in keeping with what we're trying to do here, build local economy,
Yeah.
and give jobs for Stone Islanders if we can.
Yeah.
So.
Could, yeah. So can I say my little summary of the top 3 points I think we made and see if it, so broadly, that we agree that it should be affordable, rent-controlled housing at some cap or level, market percentage, whatever the norm is at least, for Metro Vancouver. And the council would streamline the process of the rezoning and the design considerations so he can build affordable housing, so it doesn't make it onerous. And that there's a certain percentage of fixed long-term rent tenancy agreements.
I'm not sure that's
Is that-
what we.
No?
I would say that the thing I've heard most of all is that it has to be tied to job ongoing.
Well, oh, sorry, yeah, well, okay, so that was a given,
This is
yeah,
housing
tied to a
for-
job on board.
Housing for workers.